It's okay when you're small and things can still kind of move, but as you start to grow, if you're not starting to think about a culture within your company and with how your team members kind of interact with each other and how you do more than just work, you're going to start to see some issues. You can't always pinpoint it and say, that's exactly the reason why we need a culture because of this one thing, right? And sometimes you can, but it's really just kind of having that cohesiveness within your team, right? And if all you're doing is clocking in and grinding for 8 or 9 hours a day and clocking out, and have zero relationship with your team members, and maybe not even caring, your work is going to show that.
I'm Doug.
I'm Una.
That was Brad Williams.
And this is our podcast,
Amazing Teams.
Join us as we have conversations with remarkable people who are building amazing teams.
All right, Brad Williams, welcome to the Amazing Teams podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course, Brad Williams is the CEO and co-founder of Web Dev Studios, a WordPress website design and development agency. He has helped grow the company from a coffee table startup to one of the oldest and most respected WordPress agencies, working with clients like Microsoft, Viacom, Campbell Soup Company, Starbucks, and the NBA. Wow, you've been at this for quite some time. Brad, how did this all get started?
Yeah, I've always been into technology. I've always really loved exploring the web ever since first getting online on AOL, in the mid 90s. And so I set up my first website on like Angel Fire, I think it was.
Oh, you're dating yourself.
I know, I really am. And people may not even know what I'm talking about, right? Like that's how old the web's getting. But it's like the idea that I could build a website and, I use that term loosely back then, right? Like a one-page thing with like some text on it. And then go to school and like show my friends in the library. And it was like just blowing everyone's mind. They thought I was like some elite hacker, and I was like, it was just cool. Right. So ever since then, I knew whatever I ended up doing in my life, I knew it would have something to do with the internet and the web. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, after high school, I joined the Marine Corps and the Marines and actually built websites in the Marine Corps, if you can believe that. So they really helped teach me how to build more dynamic, like database driven websites and things like that. And then after the Marines, that's what I did. I went and worked at a big e-commerce agency for 4 or 5 years, and then eventually regrouped with one of the guys I was in the Marine Corps with and said, let's start our own company. Didn't have a great plan, just jumped, went for it. And that was 2008, which was, in hindsight was insane because like the economy started to collapse, there's all this like bankruptcy and we're over here trying to start like a new company, but in some weird way, it kind of worked out for us because people started to diversify. They wanted to do things online more and see if they could maybe make their hobby into more of a professional gig because they got laid off. And they were like, why not? Let's just go for it. And here we are today, 16 years later, still doing it.
Wow.
How many people do you have today? Sounds like you started with 2, and now how strong is the team?
Yeah, we're usually having around 40 people, give or take 40 people. We're a fully distributed company, and we have been that way really since our inception. If we're going to get really good talent at this company, we have to like hire people in like Philly or New York or somewhere where the people are at, right? And so we just kind of fell into remote work, which back then was weird. And then at some point it started to flip. And obviously ever since 2020, remote is just like almost the norm in many areas. So it's funny how that kind of evolved from being kind of this weird thing we used to talk about with clients to being like, oh yeah, of course you are. Like we all are. A lot of us are.
What was your plan with the company when you started in terms of growth? Did you think it was going to be you and your buddy, or did you intend to grow it and get to, 40, 50, whatever many people that you have today?
I think I was so naive. We didn't have a great plan. We didn't really have a 5 or 10 year, like this is where we want to be. It was more like we want to build websites. Let's just dive in and like figure it out, and just started growing and getting accounts, especially as WordPress became more of a really legit option for, as a traditional kind of CMS versus just a blogging platform, which is what it started out as. And a lot of people were really getting interested in the idea of open source and using things like WordPress or Drupal, big brands, big corporations. So we were kind of at the forefront of that. So just good timing, kind of being one of the leaders in the space. Big brands want to start getting into WordPress. They started calling us up. Began 2010, we made the decision, we got to go all in on the platform. Because if we're trying to be the best at everything, we're going to be very average at a lot of stuff, right? It was risky at the time because WordPress wasn't as dominant as it is right now. And we're like, let's just go all in on WordPress. We can be the best at one platform. We can market towards that platform. When you're thinking of WordPress and growing in big business, we could be the people you're thinking about. And again, a little bit of luck and timing, because WordPress really started to take off around 2010. And just, the trajectory of usage just went up significantly, very quickly. So It was risky looking back. Nowadays, it's like, yeah, so many people use it. Of course, it's a great platform. That's not that risky of a decision. But back then, it kind of was because we didn't know, are all these companies going to really want to use WordPress, or do they still think of it as just blogging?
We were drooling over your website and all the books that you have written to contribute back to WordPress. And Doug was mentioning I forgot now the phrase, but 5% of time that you donate back to developing open source software. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's called Five for the Future. And it's an initiative that was put out, I think it was 2014, by Matt Mullenweg, who was one of the co-founding, developers of WordPress, or co-founders of WordPress software, if you will. He kind of put that initiative out and said, look, if all the companies that are really relying on WordPress for, whatever, either to build with WordPress or for their website or whatever, but if we all just spent 5% of our time giving back to the WordPress open source project, like imagine how impactful that could be, like at scale, which is true, right? Like there's just tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people and companies using WordPress. So 5% of that time is a massive amount of time. So we contribute to WordPress in a lot of kind of unofficial ways at that time. I've contributed to WordPress core. I've gotten props for doing that. We have a lot of plugins out there on WordPress or on GitHub, but we never really had like an official way of saying this is what our company does. So when Matt Mullenweg put that out there, we're like, great, that sounds awesome. So we've been doing it ever since. So now we basically dedicate the last Friday of the month, and it's all hands. We just contribute to WordPress. It's a great break from the client grind for a team. They can work on passion projects, maybe do something a little different than they normally do in a given day or week, or just take a break from coding. Maybe they just want to go answer support questions, help out new users. Maybe they want to contribute some content about, hey, here's how I solved this interesting problem with WordPress. So it's pretty loose in terms of what we consider contributing, but our goal is you're putting things out there publicly at some point. You don't have to build and release like a plugin in one day, but at some point the goal should be that whatever you work on, you do want to release. Putting things back out there for WordPress, for open source, and really helping grow that project. So we've been doing it ever since. That's a decade ago. Now that, again, talking about time, it goes fast. So we've been doing it for 10 years. So it's pretty neat to see the stats and data of how much time we've actually dedicated, to contributing back. Because if everyone just takes, people have to contribute or it doesn't exist. And that's a very important part of open source. And we fully believe in that.
So it sounds like you're the technical co-founder, right? I'm just curious, how's that been growing a team as a technical co-founder, and what challenges have you faced?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Because it's one thing when you're kind of scrappy and you're just building things out on your own. And of course, when we first started, we were building the websites just however we built them on our own, right? So obviously over time that has changed. My role has obviously changed where I'm not coding, do it for fun, but not for clients. Way smarter people at this company. What did Steve Jobs say? Like, don't tell them what to do, let them tell you what to do type situation, right? But there is, as any developer, technical or otherwise, like in your career, like there's got to be certain kind of pivotal moments where you have to make a decision, kind of the direction you want to go, right? An early one after you've been developing for a while, but is if you want to get into like more of a management role, like an engineering manager or something in that capacity. And that means probably less coding, but more mentoring, more coaching, more reviewing code and helping grow those developers under you to be the best that they can possibly be, right? And so my role kind of transitioned into that early on, and then it continued to grow. Obviously, now I'm CEO and kind of overseeing everything as we've gotten bigger. Well, me and my partner, we wear a lot of hats. We're not that big of a company. So one, you have to get comfortable with that, and you have to make the decision, do I want to go that route, or is coding the only thing I want to do? Like if I'm not writing code, I am not happy. And there are people like that, and that's fine, right? That's okay. But if that's the direction you want to go, then going to a more management position is probably not what you want to do. Part of it is kind of understanding as the company grows, as your role grows, what direction you want to go and what are you comfortable with in terms of the career and the direction. So I think it's understanding that as you grow, things are going to change. You got to get people under you. You got to really mentor them and grow them, and just really understanding what your role is, especially as like your company is growing. Because I think if you can't really define that, then the people under you aren't going to really understand it either, right? And that's when things start to get really messy and, start to fall apart.
I read something recently, diving into some research around what you're doing at WebDev. I read something about, I guess it was around cultural fit, hiring for cultural fit. Can you talk a little bit about that? I guess it was something you shared with somebody else.
Yeah, culture is very important for us, and primarily because we've been distributed for so long. It's okay when you're small and things can still kind of move, but as you start to grow, if you're not starting to think about a culture within your company and with how your team members kind of interact with each other and how you do more than just work, you're going to start to see some issues. You can't always pinpoint it and say that's exactly the reason why we need a culture because of this one thing, right? And sometimes you can, but it's really just kind of having that cohesiveness within your team, right? And if all you're doing is clocking in and grinding for 8 or 9 hours a day and clocking out and having zero relationship with your team members and maybe not even caring, your work is going to show that, right? It's going to come across in your work. It's going to be sloppy. It's going to look like you don't really care because you probably don't, right? You're just there to clock in and clock out. And look, I understand a job is a job. It's not always going to be fun. It's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't those like, quirky tech companies that are just like playing ping pong all day, right? Like, so it's finding a balance. How do you work hard? How do you play hard? Like, how do you have fun doing what you're doing? What things can you do within the company to help outside of client work? I mentioned 5 for the future. That's a great example because yes, it is still potentially coding or potentially doing what you do, but it's not a requirement, right? We let them kind of choose like, hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to work on? But it allows them to work on generally what we see is our team gravitates towards things they're passionate about, right? And it allows them to kind of have that flexibility and control and spend the day doing something they're really passionate about and really in that day on our super high note going into the weekend, feeling really proud of themselves, showing off the world what they've done, contributing back to open source. So culture, I think at all levels is super important, but especially distributed because it's so much harder when you're not face to face. You don't get these random interactions at a water cooler. I don't get to stop by your desk and say, hey, how was your weekend? What'd you do for just that 5-minute little sync? You don't get that in remote unless you intentionally make it happen, and I think that's something that I'm sure a lot of companies have figured that out in the last few years. And I'm sure a lot of them have figured it out the hard way. You go from, especially these brick and mortar companies that were kind of forced into a distributed model. They probably had no idea about any of that stuff because they didn't have to. They were all doing it together, having their pizza parties, having their, let's celebrate someone's big accomplishments together or someone's birthday with a cake in the break room, So, but then when you realize when you're remote, that stuff isn't happening, it is going to start to, wear on your employees and the work is going to be affected. So it needs to be intentional and need to really think about how you can not only build that culture, but maintain it. It's not a set it and forget it type of situation.
Yeah, I agree. You have to be super intentional. I'm curious how you are encouraging the collaboration and open communication amongst your team members there.
So we tried all sorts of stuff over the years. Again, the great thing, we talk about tools and technology. The great thing is there's just so many cool things out there now that can help with this. Obviously, Hey Taco, that's why we're talking today, right? We've been a huge fan of Hey Taco from the start. One of the reasons we love Hey Taco so much is because it allows our team to really thank other team members in a public way for helping them in some capacity. And that's really how we use it, right? We use it to give props, to give thanks. Hey, so-and-so, I had a question, they helped me out, or someone covered a phone call for me because I had to run out unexpectedly. Or we always make sure they can only, give tacos in one room, which is our general room. So everybody sees it. I don't want these like siloed by teams or projects. I want the whole company to see this, right? So being able to give kudos and props and thanks, at the team member level is huge, right? It's not just, your managers or the owners saying, hey, you did a good job. Yes, that's expected. We should do that. But when like my peer thanks me because I really helped them, or maybe they were stuck and I helped them, like that probably means more in some capacity than maybe my manager in some instances, because now I'm helping my peers and now they're gaining more respect for me, and the communication and all that. So another great one that we do is called a sup bot, like what's up, sup. And what it does, this is configurable, but essentially on whatever cadence you set, we set ours bi-weekly. So every other week on Monday, it does this across the whole company. It'll pair 3 people together, send them a DM and say, hey, this is your sup group this week. Schedule a 15, 20-minute call whenever it works and just have a chat. Not work related, just to say, hey. And what it does is it gets a lot of people talking that don't normally talk, right? You might have one team member here, another team member, maybe a manager, maybe our HR, maybe it's the marketing. It gets people together that don't normally talk and they just get to hang out 15, 20 minutes. It's not work related. It's like, hey, what'd you do over the weekend? Hey, have you watched any cool movies lately or play any cool games? And that's been really well received because, again, like intentionally getting people to talk and interact that don't normally need to, you start to see it. You start to see it across the whole company. You start to see how people treat each other. I don't want to act like they're treating each other better or not worse or whatever, but like I feel like you could really see the connection growing in the way that people communicate and interact with each other, especially remote. So like those type of tools I think are so cool because it's automated. It just does its thing. I'm in the mix as well as anybody else. And every other week, we're just 3 of us are chatting. And it's company wide. So everybody's doing this bi-weekly. And again, it's all configurable, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. It's been really well received. We started doing that about a year ago and it's been a lot of fun.
I think there's something to the point of it's not like people treat each other better, but it's about people know each other, right? So it's really hard to get angry and mad at someone when you know who they are. Otherwise, they're just a name written on an email and you could assume all the worst about a person. But if you know this is Brad and he has 3 dogs and he lives in Philly and loves the Eagles, I kind of know the guy. I know he doesn't mean anything bad.
It's relationships, right? We talk about this a lot internally. I talk about this with my clients. Everything that we do in life when we're interacting with people is relationships, right? So obviously my relationship with my team is going to be different than like my relationship with a client, but it's still a relationship, just like a relationship with your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend. Relationships take work, right? They take work. You can just set it and say, this is going to be perfect forever. If we do nothing to cultivate this relationship, it's not going to work, right? So to your point, you're right. As people know each other better, as people form these relationships, and especially with people they don't normally work with, it helps everything just kind of level out. Clients too, right? Like if you have a good relationship with a client and they know they can trust you, or they know they can come directly to me if they have any questions or concerns at all. Like we're not a big enough company where you can't come to the CEO. Like, of course you can come to me. If you have I want to talk to you if there's a situation. Things are going to go sideways, right? Things are going to go wrong. It's technology, like things are going to happen, right? But if you have a good relationship, it's less likely that they're going to kick the door in, guns blazing, like what happened, flipping tables, firing, they're going to come in and say, look, there's a situation. We need some help. We need to resolve it. And that immediate like pressure is going to come down because you already have that relationship with them. So in team members, exactly the same thing. It's a great point. Like, it is relationships and it's forming those bonds when normally they maybe wouldn't be formed if we were more intentional about making that happen.
Besides collaboration, I know you do a lot of things for fun too. And because it's March and we're getting into March Madness, can you tell us more about how you celebrate it? Because I thought what you do was pretty fun.
We set up March Madness for our team. Anyone can participate. It's optional if you want. And we give away prizes. And our favorite prize to give away, as you might guess, is tacos because one, it's easy. And two, we're already set up. So first prize, I get like 100 tacos, seconds 50, thirds, 20 or 30. And then we also have a loser award, which is a special gift from me. And some people might try to get this, I don't know. But if you're Lash, I'd send them a special gift that they have to bring to our all hands meeting. It's usually a silly gift like a burrito blanket or, a beer belly fanny pack, something silly, but a singing pickle, I think one year. I just find this kind of the dumbest things I can find on Amazon. But that type of stuff, again, it is a little more traditional, but you can still do it in a remote company, just like football pick'ems, for Christmas, like ugly sweater competitions. We'll do a whole month of holiday events for Christmas. We're big into Halloween, so we like Halloween too. But we'll do holiday happy hours. We'll have ugly Christmas sweater. We'll watch a holiday movie together over lunch because there's tools that can do this remotely. Kind of getting clever with how we do things, but some of it traditional, but we're doing it online. Some of it not as traditional, like the SupBot, that we're doing, using the technology. So yeah, March Madness is coming up. So that's always a really fun time. And what's funny is almost every year, whoever wins it has no idea what they're doing. We had one person win. They picked purely based off the mascots they liked and they won, so it's not like you have to be this amazing professional following, college basketball for years to have any shot. It's like, just pick some teams and nobody knows what they're doing and you have a really good shot at winning.
How does all this get executed? I'm assuming you're not the only one driving, organizing, making this happen. How does this happen?
A lot of it is, we like to take the temperature of our team members through one-on-ones, through conversations, our management team, all of us. Like, we're very open book. We're like, hey, if you have ideas, you have suggestions, we want to hear it. And if it's something, we all agree makes sense, we'll do it or we'll try it. I know one suggestion, which we've been doing and we want to start bringing it back. We haven't done it in a little while, is like once a month, we'd have like a game night. It would be like after hours. I don't know if you're familiar with the Jackbox games. They're pretty fun, but you can kind of set up the server basically, and everybody can log in from their phone and play against each other. And then we'd have like a Zoom or a Google Meet set up, and it would just be like, show up if you want, maybe have a drink if you want. It doesn't matter. Like, it's an after hours thing, but it's like a game night basically for the company. And we'd get, 8 to 10 people would show up and have fun. The biggest thing is listen to your team. I'm at the top, right? I'm not seeing everything. I'm not at the ground level of every project or every conversation. I shouldn't be, right? The team is, and they're going to have the ones that really have the best ideas of what is working or maybe what isn't working. So definitely solicit feedback, ask for feedback, say, hey, we want to implement some stuff. Who has ideas? Here's a suggestion box. Dump them in here, Look at what other companies are doing. Like we're talking about here, a lot of these apps and stuff. There's tons of articles about this stuff out there that people could look into just to get some ideas on how do you build a culture, what fun stuff can you do as a distributed company or even in-person company. There's some great ideas out there.
That's great. Yeah, we'll share some links in the podcast notes about these apps you're talking about, especially that Hey Taco app. We'll share a link to that. Our podcast is called Amazing Teams. I'm curious what you think of when you hear amazing teams.
When I think amazing teams, I immediately go back to kind of my teams, right? We have 4 teams at our company of project development teams, basically. But what I think of is really just passion, ownership, teams that click on all levels. We talk about kind of having that, connection, the relationship, the culture. Teams should have really the tightest connection at all because they're working together day in and day out, right? Like if the 3 of us are on a team, we should know each other really well, out not just at the work environment, but also like you said, what are your passions? What are you into? Sports, other, games, whatever. Like in over time, you learn that whether you want to or not, inadvertently, you kind of learn more about your team, right? So really just teams that really are cohesive or connecting. They really kind of own what they're working on. They worked well together, really firing on cylinders. And you can tell those teams, right? They're high performing teams. And then you can, on the flip side, you could tell when something's not quite right with the team. And it may not always be obvious what it is, right? But you can usually tell something's not right. Like something's off here. They're not clicking. I don't know what it is. And then when you start to dig in, you start to talk to managers, you start to kind of listen in on calls, then you can usually start to identify, these 2 people just do not get along. They don't click. They butt heads. And we're all different. We all have different personalities, right? And sometimes people just don't work well together. And there's no fixing it. And it doesn't mean it's necessarily bad or wrong. It's just the personalities don't match, right? Identify that as quick as possible. Move them, figure out some way to move them, reset, figure out where the problem might be. And maybe it is a larger issue that you get more disciplinary type stuff. But, it's usually pretty clear when a team is firing on all cylinders. They're high performers, they're enjoying their work, they're having fun, and they're just knocking out of the park versus the ones that aren't.
You raise a good point there around when there are teammates that are not working well together. How do you discover that? Like, do you have tools or processes in place to discover that stuff? Like, how does it come to a head?
Honestly, it usually bubbles up from, managers, or like all of our teams have a project manager and a lead engineer, and they're essentially the kind of the management team of that team. We also have a management level, above them. Generally, the project managers or leads are going to identify it unless it's one of them, right? And that's where usually their managers are going to identify it. But generally speaking, they're going to say, hey, like we're having, just some personality issues. And it's not like, all hands on deck, like get the owners on the call with everybody. It's like, okay, well, let's kind of talk about what's going on. Let's make sure we're paying attention. Let's monitor it for a bit. And then let's make some decisions on what we may or may not do. But generally, it's surfaced up from the team that's having the issue, or it's apparent on phone calls where the managers are on. It's like, wow, like the PM asked this engineer a question and they kind of came off a little bit, jaded, like something's up here. That was a weird call. You know what I mean? You can just kind of feel when the vibes are weird. And that's usually when you want to start kind of digging in a little bit and see what's going on.
What do you do in that case? The vibes are weird. What's your response or the manager's response? What do you do about mitigating that? Might be the word.
Yeah, I definitely put trust but verify. Like I put a lot of trust in my team, my management team. So the first thing we do is sit down with the managers and say, all right, what's going on? Get all the facts, what we know today, and then say, okay, if it's more severe, we'll do something almost immediately. Generally, our stance is let's monitor the situation and see if it's just maybe someone's having an off day. But if we're seeing this over time and over a couple meetings, then we'll step in and say, okay, something's up. And then we'll start having more direct conversations. We have ongoing one-on-ones, which also is another good area where this type of stuff can surface because it's a very kind of safe space for that person to really bring what's on their mind. So that's a good area. But we would initiate more the one-on-ones and say, all right, what's going on? Like, let's just have a conversation. Like, what's up? Something's not right. And we're not quite sure what it is, but we can tell something's not right. And usually they'll just start spilling their guts, right? Like, oh, this is, this person did this and blah, blah, blah. That once you get more of the information, then you can kind of figure out what next steps might be and how severe or not. But generally speaking, if you get ahead of that stuff and identify it early, it's usually fixable. But there will be times where, like I said, just no matter what you do, 2 people aren't going to get along. Like that's going to happen. So you can't just kind of force the square peg in a round hole sometimes. You have to identify, you know what, this person is a square peg, this person's round. They can't be on the same team. They're both great, but they just don't get along. If it happens again with one of those people, now there's a pattern. Now there's a common denominator. This person is not getting along with this other group. This is a bigger concern, right? And now we might have to go into more performance, situation, write up or otherwise. A lot of it is just monitoring it, giving them safe spaces to get that information out. Most people don't want to, drag their teammate through the mud on a team call. But if you get them on a one-on-one, they're going to tell you their concerns and their problems and why they're agitated or why that person's really rubbing them the wrong way, and then hopefully you can get to the bottom of it.
I got to share a story, maybe a tip that I just learned yesterday or 2 days ago. I was talking to one of our future podcast guests who has been in education for, 15, 20 years and is a leader in that industry. And she said when kids would come to her office, 2 boys, 2 girls or whatever, saying, they got in trouble for fighting or whatnot. She said the first question she would ask them is, well, tell me one thing that you like about each other. And they would be forced to say, well, I really like this. And I really like finding the silver lining. Well, says this person, rubs me the wrong way and they're whatever. And I thought it was such a good question. If you can ask it to a 12-year-old, why not ask it to a 40-year-old? What's the difference in a sense? I thought it was fun.
We're going to try that out.
We're going to try that out. Yeah.
I like that.
Brad, what are some next cultural team connectedness things, initiatives, ideas that are brewing in your mind that might not be manifested yet, but you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, one other thing we do, and we're working to get back into it, is again, being distributed. There's a lot of value to face time. So we have annual company retreat. We did it every year, really, up until 2020, and then everything got out of whack. But we're trying to get back into that. So we're going to do a leadership retreat, get all of our managers, everyone together, and really sit down and kind of map out our goals for the year, for the next couple of years, 5 years, whatever, go through processes, all that. And then obviously hoping to get an annual retreat either later in the year or sometime soon. But being a remote's great. But when you get together face to face, even for a short amount of time, again, there's a pretty obvious benefit that we see when they come back to work. They all go back home, that those relationships are way tighter because there's a lot more downtime to kind of just hang out, get to know people on a more personal level. Of course, we do a lot of work during the day, but there's a lot of opportunities just to hang out and have fun. So, we see that when they come back, like that camaraderie is tighter. Issues are usually diffused much quicker. I think it's an important note that even though we are distributed, times where we can get together are also important. That's kind of the next forefront, is just getting that back and keeping it rolling going forward. So
I'm curious what keeps you motivated and inspired.
It's a good question. Honestly, I think the thing that motivates me is sometimes I take a step back and kind of look at what we built. Like, it's easy to be in the weeds and, what's just, the big focus today or tomorrow or this week. But if taking a step back and just kind of looking at the larger picture of the last 16 years, and we started with nothing basically, and now we're working with brands that everybody knows. I mean, I work from home. I get way more time with my son than I would if I had to commute. I take him to school in the morning. I pick him up most days. And he's 8. So I really cherish, the time because I know it's quick. It seems like the other day he was 2 and now he's 8. And before I know it, he'll be driving. And so I'm trying to get as much possible time, while I have with him. So, I think just the freedom around being remote and the flexibility around it, it's easy to kind of forget about that when you've been doing it for 16 years. So I like to take a step back and be like, you know what? I am really fortunate. I get to work at home, have a lot more free time, get to do awesome stuff at work. Really proud of the work that we do. But that personal time and that family time is the most important thing in the world, right? So the more of that you can get back, and the more of that you can get back to your team, you can't put a dollar amount on that. What's the value of 3 or 4 extra hours every day? It's huge. It's huge. Yeah. So that's what keeps me motivated. I want to keep doing this. I love what we're doing. I love the flexibility. And I knew if I had to go back into a more traditional job or go into an office, I'd have way less time at home. That's my motivation to keep it going.
That's great. I love that. And you're right about the wasted time commuting. I'm being reminded of that, meeting up with the team 3 days a week and spending 6 hours in the car each week. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But it's worth it, Doug. Just say that it's worth it.
It's worth it.
But as you described, as a result, you have to be intentional, not you, but one has to be intentional about building a team and a culture because it doesn't happen as a side effect of seeing each other in person and having lunch together every day, right? It has to be on purpose.
We talk about this a lot publicly, right? We tweet about it. We like to brag about what we're doing, whether it's work related, as we should as a company, whether it's work related or fun related, right? So we put it out there, and so people, another kind of side effect, a great side effect, a benefit is people want to come work for us. They know we're not just trying to grind them 10 hours a day of coding and then dump them on the side of the road in 6 months and find somebody. They're not just a number or a body to us, right? We want them to be here and be engaged, do amazing work. We want to support them. We want them to have fun while they're doing it. And so, we're known for having fun. I mean, you guys were kind of checking out our website, and, if you start looking closely, there's a lot of kind of silly stuff on there. There's probably 4 or 5 different Easter eggs. I think you found one. There's a lot of them on there. We like to have fun. We do some amazing stuff for huge brands, but we really don't want to take ourselves too seriously. I'm not a suit and tie guy, even though I was in the Marine Corps. I feel like that's probably why we're the opposite in a sense, because I've already been down that strict road of, everything has to be exact, in terms of suit and tie and like, uniforms and military and all that stuff, where it's like, I've done that. That's not the type of company I want. I want a company that, yes, we can get some amazing things done. When it hits the fan, we can jump in and, figure it out for our clients, but I want to have fun doing it. I want to have good work-life balance for me and for my team. I want to make sure that we're really feeling like we're doing great work while we're here, but when we're not here, we're not sitting there thinking about work. We're not sitting there thinking about, that ticket I got to deal with Monday. You shouldn't be thinking about that at your kid's soccer game. So we're doing everything we can to protect that and, keep that culture going. Because again, like you said, it's not a set it and forget it. Like you constantly have to work on it and, try these tools. They might work for some people. They may not work for some, right? But there's a lot of different things out there that you can kind of experiment with to try to get, especially more collaboration between your teams that don't normally collaborate. And I think that's kind of one of the important parts, is getting people connected that don't normally connect within your organization.
I love that. As you know, with Hey Taco, you have 5 tacos to give each day. You can use those tacos to recognize someone for something they've done or to show your appreciation. Brad, who are you giving your 5 tacos to today and why?
Man, that's a great question. Yeah, we do that. 5 tacos every day. I like to spread them out. So I'll give you each a taco for having me on, because this has been a lot of fun. I will give my partner, Lisa, I'll give her 2 tacos. We are really yin and yang. We kind of talked about my technical side. She's obviously technical, but she leans more in the design kind of UI UX world. So when she joined our company, when we merged, and my other partner went off to do more products, so it's just me and Lisa. We really, we're yin and yang. I feel like we complement each other really well, and that's so important in business, especially if you have a partner. It's like a marriage at that point, right? Like it's the biggest relationship other than being married, basically, that you can have, is a business partner. So I really enjoyed working with her over the years and really respect everything she's brought to the table to help this company grow and succeed. So, and I'll give the last taco to my wife, who also works at WebDev, if you can believe it. And people think we're insane. We both work at the same company. She was our first hire to help us because again, we didn't know what we were doing. We were just billing people, taking money. We had a box full of receipts. We weren't tracking anything. And then had to pay a lot of money to an accountant to figure all that out. So the next year I was like, hey, you want to work part-time for us to help us kind of do this ongoing? So we went to pay all that money. And then that turned into a full-time job. She's been there ever since. So the fact that we can like work together in the same house, day in and day out, live together. We're together like 24/7 and it works. It probably works because our offices are opposite sides of the house, to be fair, but she deserves a taco. So I'll give one to my wife, April.
That's great. Brad, I want to thank you for being on our podcast. I also want to thank you for serving our country. Absolutely. And also for all of your support over the years to Hey Taco. Where can our listeners go to learn more about WebDev Studios and find you?
Yeah, check out our site, webdevstudios.com. We have a really active blog. So if you're into WordPress, we share a lot of like technical info, plugins, how to build things. So if you're into building in WordPress, you want to learn more, our blog is, /blog. It's awesome. Sign up for that. Check it out. I'm kind of on Twitter. I don't know. I feel like I'm more of a lurker these days, but if you message me on Twitter, I'm sure I'll see it at WilliamsBA. But I'm around. Reach out. You can always reach out through WebDev. If you want to talk, I'm happy to. I geek out on this stuff. I like talking open source, I like talking tech, AI and stuff's all the rage right now. I love building some Roblox games with my son. I'm kind of all over the place, but yeah, reach out if you want to geek out.
Awesome. Thank
Brad,
you.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, then please share this podcast with others. And we would love to know how we did. You can tell us by going to amazingteams.com/feedback.